What if I told you that one of the world's biggest companies started with just a simple idea? Today, we're uncovering the incredible story behind its rise, from a tiny startup to a global giant. This is Origin Files. Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1. The Stanford Connection. Picture this. The year is 1995. We're at Stanford University, right in the heart of Silicon Valley. Larry Page, an introverted engineering grad from the University of Michigan, just arrived to check out the computer science program. His campus guide, a highly social math genius named Sergey Brin. Now, you might think it was an instant connection, but actually, they clashed constantly. They debated everything from urban planning to computer science. But beneath all that bantering, a legendary partnership was brewing. You see, they both looked at the early internet and realized it was an absolute mess. It was chaos. Back in the early 90s, searching the web was super primitive. Giants like Yahoo were basically using manual curation. Imagine teams of people physically building handcrafted directories like a giant table of contents for the internet. It was incredibly slow, and there was just no way to scale it. Larry and Sergey knew that to really organize the web, you absolutely could not do it by hand. You needed automation. They envisioned a system that would automatically crawl the internet, following links from page to page, mapping out the whole web without any human intervention. Moving on to part 2, building the PageRank engine. So, operating literally right out of their Stanford dorm rooms, they start building this highly ambitious prototype search engine. And they gave it a pretty hilarious name, Backrub. Yep, Backrub, because it analyzed the web's backlinks. But don't let the funny name fool you, Backrub was a fiercely sophisticated mathematical system. It took some serious computing juice to crawl through their test set of 24 million live web pages and map out this giant family tree of information. This right here was their massive evolutionary leap. It was the invention of the PageRank algorithm. Instead of just doing what everyone else did, counting how many times a keyword showed up on a page, which was super easy to manipulate, PageRank treated every single web link like a human judgment. Think of it like this. If one website linked to another, it was essentially casting a vote of confidence. And if a massive, highly trusted site like Yahoo's homepage linked to you, well, that vote counted for way more. It was brilliant. They essentially took the wild, uncontrolled web and turned it into a mapped, reliable, and deeply accurate repository of human knowledge. Now, as you can imagine, indexing 24 million pages required some serious storage. They needed 40 gigabytes of hard drive space, and in 1996, that was a massive, incredibly expensive amount of storage. But remember, they're just scrappy grad students on a super tight budget. They definitely couldn't afford those fancy, expensive server racks. So what did they do? They went out, bought 10 separate hard drives, and built their own custom casing entirely out of colorful Lego bricks. No way, right? But it's true. This super resourceful DIY solution let them easily swap out parts and save a ton of cash. Plus, it perfectly set the stage for that innovative, playful culture that would eventually define the whole company. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how a simple mistake changed everything. By late 1997, their tech was getting so good that the name Backrub just wasn't going to cut it anymore. During a brainstorming session that September, Larry and his office mate Sean Anderson were just throwing ideas at a whiteboard. Sean suggests the mathematical term Googleplex, referring to a mind-bogglingly massive number. Larry likes it, but shortens it to Google. So Sean hops on his computer to check if the internet domain is available. But, well, Sean wasn't exactly the best speller. He accidentally types in google.com. Larry sees it, absolutely loves the misspelling, and within hours registers the domain. Literally, history was made because of a typo. All right, on to part 3, from garage to Google. By 1998, their dorm rooms had completely devolved into a chaotic programming center. It was time for a real workspace. So they officially drop out of their PhD programs, though Sergey's advisor famously told him, hey, you can always come back if it fails. And they move out. Their first actual office? A suburban garage in Menlo Park, California, rented from their friend Susan Wojcicki, who, spoiler alert, later becomes the CEO of YouTube. They pack that garage with clunky desktop computers, a ping pong table, and this bright blue carpet, totally setting the vibe for the unconventional tech campuses we see today. But to scale up, they needed serious cash. Get this, they actually tried to sell the entire company to Yahoo and Excite for $1 million and got rejected. So they went looking for investors. In August 1998, they pitched Sun Microsystems co-founder Andy Bechtolsheim and Stanford professor David Cheriton. After just a quick demo, these two guys are so blown away, they both write $100,000 checks right there on the spot. But here's the crazy catch. They wrote those checks to Google Inc., a legal entity that Larry and Sergey hadn't even formally incorporated yet. These early investors were obviously taking a massive gamble. But as Professor David Cheriton put it, good ideas are common, but finding the right people to execute them is rare. You see, Cheriton wasn't just investing in a piece of search technology. He was investing in Larry and Sergey. As a computer science professor himself, he saw that these two had an incredibly rare combination going for them. They had this bold, world-changing vision, sure, but they also had the intense technical mastery to actually pull it off. They simply understood the mechanics of the web better than anyone else alive at the time. That brings us to part 4, scaling the search giant. With the funding locked in, Google absolutely exploded. People flocked to it because of the super clean interface and, frankly, way better search results. And they finally cracked the monetization code too, but they did it without annoying their users. Instead of flashy, intrusive pop-ups, they introduced these highly targeted, discrete text ads. It kept the site looking clean while transforming Google into this phenomenally profitable advertising behemoth almost overnight. Now, as the money is pouring in and they blast past 1,000 employees, investors start getting a little nervous. They realize these young founders might need some help steering this massive corporate ship. Enter Eric Schmidt. They brought him on as CEO in 2001 to provide what the industry jokingly called adult supervision. And here's a fun fact for you. Larry and Sergey actually decided Schmidt was their guy after hanging out with him at the Burning Man festival, which, by the way, was the inspiration for the very first Google Doodle back in 1998. Anyway, with Schmidt taking over the day-to-day business operations, Larry and Sergey were finally totally free to focus on the technology and the big picture.
Let's move to 2002 and see how this builds, because Google's momentum in the early 2000s was just unstoppable. By this point, Yahoo realizes they made a massive, terrible mistake and tries to buy Google for $3 billion. Google's response? A hard no. Then in 2004, right on April Fool's Day, they drop Gmail, offering a staggering 1 gigabyte of free storage. That was so unheard of at the time, people literally thought it was a prank. Later that same year, they go public with a massive $27 billion valuation. And then, in 2006, pushed heavily by early employee Susan Wojcicki, Google buys a fledgling, lawsuit-riddled video startup called YouTube for $1.65 billion. That bold move would go down as one of the most brilliant acquisitions in tech history.
All right, part 5, expanding the tech empire. So by now, Google isn't just a verb for searching the internet anymore. It's becoming a sprawling tech empire. Larry and Sergey were incredibly hungry, and they weren't afraid to step onto the home turf of titans like Microsoft and Apple. They knew that to keep their search engine on top, they had to control the actual gateways to the internet. First, Larry Page quietly scoops up a small mobile operating system called Android for a cool $50 million. He saw the smartphone revolution coming from a mile away, and today, Android is the most popular mobile operating system on the planet. Next up, they essentially poached top developers from Mozilla to build their very own web browser, Google Chrome. Built for pure speed and stability, Chrome absolutely blindsided Microsoft's Internet Explorer. Today, it commands roughly 60% of all browser usage worldwide. But hey, you can't win them all, right? Their meteoric rise definitely had some serious stumbles. For instance, the explosion of Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook caught Google completely off guard. As users shifted from just searching for facts to actively connecting and sharing with friends, Google panicked. Big time. They launched Google Plus to take Facebook head-on, even instituting this intense, company-wide lockdown to force it to succeed. But despite all their genius, they fundamentally misunderstood what users actually wanted. Google Plus was designed around people sharing all their emails, photos, and thoughts entirely publicly, and users just weren't into it. The data was brutal. 90% of user sessions on Google Plus lasted less than 5 seconds. It was a staggering loss in the social media war. Moving into part 6, the Alphabet era. Despite the whole Google Plus fiasco, their innovation engine just kept roaring. By 2015, they had their hands in so many wildly different industries. I'm talking everything from Google Glass to life extension biotechnology, that the traditional corporate structure was literally bursting at the seams. To clean things up, Larry Page announced a massive restructuring. They created a brand new parent company called Alphabet. This genius move let Google stay laser-focused on its core internet products while giving the founders the freedom to place massive, risky bets on things like Waymo, which went from a fleet of 7 tweaked Priuses to a pioneering self-driving car business. This era also marked a huge changing of the guard. Sundar Pichai stepped up as CEO of Google, and the famous, slightly quirky motto, "Don't be evil," shifted to Alphabet's "Do the right thing." And they really needed to get things right, because regulators were watching them like a hawk. The scrappy startup was now widely viewed as a monopoly. Case in point, the European Union slapped them with a jaw-dropping $5 billion antitrust fine for prioritizing their own apps on Android devices. Suddenly, the stakes were higher than ever. Which brings us to the absolutely staggering scale of the empire today. To put this into perspective, a project that started in a cramped Stanford dorm room now operates under Alphabet and manages 8 distinct products that each boast over 1 billion users. Remember how Larry and Sergey once tried to offload the whole thing for a mere $1 million? Yeah, well today, its market value hovers near the $1 trillion mark. They didn't just build a successful company, they fundamentally rewired how human knowledge is stored, accessed, and distributed across the entire globe. In December 2019, Larry Page and Sergey Brin officially stepped down from their day-to-day roles, handing the full reins over to Sundar Pichai. They had successfully built a system that humanity simply can no longer live without. But it leaves us with a fascinating, massive question. With its visionary founders taking a back seat, and artificial intelligence rapidly reshaping the technological landscape once again, what's next for the company that organized the world's information? Thanks for watching Origin Files. If you enjoy uncovering the untold stories behind the world's biggest companies, AI innovations, and iconic brands, subscribe and turn on notifications. A new Origin Files documentary is released every week.